Also joining us live in the studio, Spike Cohen, founder and president. You are the power in a 2020 Libertarian vice presidential candidate. And we're also pleased to welcome Lars Mapstead, who is a candidate for president as a Libertarian in the 2024 cycle. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
What brings you to the great state of Mississippi?
So we are actually here working on a cause that we've been working on for a few months now. You and your audience may have heard a few months ago about a man named Rasheem Carter, who died under pretty suspicious circumstances in Taylorsville, Mississippi. When his body was found, it was actually found decapitated, and the police almost immediately said that they didn't think there was any foul play involved. And they have done little to nothing to actually investigate it. Eventually, the county investigators did say they were getting involved, but there's been no real movement on trying to find who is responsible for Rasheem's death. So my organization, You Are the Power, is offering a $50,000 reward for information that leads to a conviction of those responsible for Rasheem's death. So we're here to talk about that, to hand out information, and to be there for Rasheem's family.
Have you, Spike, have you met with law enforcement or investigative agencies to talk about this and to see where they stand on this?
We've reached out to them with tips that we're receiving. In fact, if anyone has information that they think might help, we invite you to go to youarethepower.net/tips. If you have information that could lead to a conviction, not only will you help bring justice to Rasheem and his family, but you could be $50,000 richer.
How did you find out about it?
We found out on social media. This is the work that we do. You Are the Power does this type of stuff across the country, and our followers found out about it, brought it to our attention. We looked into it and saw the problem that's happening here, and we got involved.
Lars, so you've decided to run for president as a Libertarian, and I see your slogan on your website is "Unrig the System." Tell us what you mean by that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if I say the system is rigged, that brings up something in your mind. Maybe it's education, maybe it's the economy, healthcare, something like that. And everybody has an idea of why the system is rigged. And so I'm looking at policies that unrig the system and help the regular folks kind of go back against the big government and take their freedom and power back.
You know, it occurs to me, Lars, that if you were to make that suggestion, the system is rigged, just declare that. It really depends on who you're talking to, doesn't it? And kind of where their persuasion is. There are folks on the left that would tell you it's rigged against them. There are folks on the right say it's rigged against us.
Yeah.
So I guess the common thread is it's rigged.
That's right. That's right. And that is really what it is the big government is rigging against the little people. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, the system is rigged against you, right? And in this case, what we're talking about right now, it's the criminal justice system that's rigged against the people, right? Because the enforcement of law is not equal. It's not the same for different people, and we're seeing that all the way down to whether you're jaywalking or whether you're Trump and you're getting in Washington D.C. The system is rigged against everybody.
Okay, so I'll be devil's advocate a little bit, or maybe just ask a provocative question along those lines. Is that the left in this country believes that it's rigged based on race, that there's just systemic racism embedded throughout the ecosystem of law enforcement at all levels. Is that kind of what we're talking about here, or is this just, I guess, more generic in nature?
Yeah, I think you can't blanket statement across the board. There's good people and bad people in all situations,
sure.
And so I don't think you can blanket statement it. But there's definitely a bias for people in certain areas of the country for sure.
Okay.
Here's what I'd say about that. Let's say it is. Let's say that our system, our government, is not just racist, but racist at a systemic level. That's an argument to make it smaller. That's an argument for government to be less involved in our lives. That's a argument for government to be less costly and to have less control of what we do on a day-to-day basis. So let's say if that's true, then that's not a reason to grow government. That's a reason to shrink it and get it out of our lives.
So, Lars, how would you kind of reconcile that with what I think is a fairly common, widespread view here in the state of Mississippi, a red, conservative state, that support law enforcement and believe that bad guys that commit crimes ought to be punished and be locked up?
Yeah. No, I agree that we should be applying the law equally is really what I'm talking about. And I'm not against police, but what I want to say is that the law is applied equally, right? And you can see this yourself. If you're driving down the road and you're going 55 miles an hour and the next guy's going 55 miles an hour and you get pulled over and the other guy doesn't, it's kind of selective, right? Yeah. It's a little bit selective, and so why isn't the law applied equally? And I think that's the injustice that people feel, and when they see it being applied unevenly, it causes division and it causes uncertainty.
Well, certainly that really, I guess, more applicable to law enforcement in that scenario, that example, agree. But are you concerned? I know we are. We talk about a lot on the program, just about the what seems to be expanded outsized control exerted by the agency complex in Washington. It seems like they have more control and power over American lives than do the people we vote for and stick in the Congress up there. We're being governed by bureaucrats.
100%. 100%. And that is because Congress is not doing their job. Congress has allowed the president to have a lot more power than he should, and they don't want to do their job. So they just keep giving away the power so that they don't have to be responsible when things are falling apart, and they can just point to some bureaucracy and say, well, it's that. We can't really do anything about that. So, part of unrigging the system is to start chopping away at this bureaucratic state and getting rid of the bureaucrats and essentially returning the power to Congress and make them do their job.
And there have been some challenges to the Supreme Court that have seen that, it's over the line there. I mean, the affirmative action deal is an example of that. The student loan situation is an example. There was an EPA case in West Virginia that really kind of got the ball rolling about a year ago that said, you really can't do that. That's not what the law said. You've extended and expanded on that, to your own accord. It just seems like they do it with impunity. In the bureaucratic state of the agency complex.
Well, they can't. I mean, that's why they call it the deep state, right? Because it doesn't matter who gets elected, as long as that system remains in place, then anything that's coming from the White House is being filtered through a seemingly unfireable bureaucrat class. And it actually leads to a lot of the injustices that we're seeing at the local and state level, where police officers are increasingly doing nothing but enforcing federal law and federal diktat. Even we saw during COVID, all of these lockdown orders that were done were being guided by the CDC and other parts of Health and Human Services. They were being handed to the states, and they were basically being coerced into doing these things. And that's why we saw it in 49 of the 50 states, some level of lockdown, some level of mandates. And the reason that happens is because you have a massive bureaucratic class that is taking most of the money and handing some of it back to the states and localities and municipalities, but with all sorts of strings attached that if they don't comply with it, they don't get the money. They don't get the money that's been taken from their own people in their own cities and counties. I think when Lars, and I'll speak on behalf of him a little, I think when he's talking about unrigging the system, he's really talking about decentralizing. The 10th Amendment, the Constitution, says that what is not explicitly given as a power to the federal government is to be left to the states or the people. And as long as we continue to have that happening at the federal level instead of at the local and state level, or really just being left to individual people, things are going to get worse and worse.
Yeah, it seems like that what illustrates that the most to me, Lars, and something I've talked about on the program here, we just as everyday citizens are impacted more by what comes out of Washington than we are that what comes out of our state house here. I mean, it's minimal, honestly, compared to what comes out of Washington, which indicates to me maybe we've conferred too much power to Washington.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, we need to get back to what our founding fathers wanted for this country was limited government, and the government was basically there to protect your rights, right, and to deliver you the freedom and the right to pursue happiness in your life. And we've gotten far away from that. The government doesn't represent that anymore at all.
Yeah. And we keep sending them back somehow, which doesn't make any sense to me. I've often said on the program, opined that, sure, term limits for members of Congress, but where we need the term limits are on these people that have been working these bureaucracies that you said a minute ago, Spike. They're about unfireable, and they run the dang country.
Yeah. Well, one of the good things that I've found is there's a thing called the Plum Book and it's a government book that tells all the agencies and the 7,000 positions that the president can fill. And I'm not going to fill those positions, right? I'm going to let Congress do its job, and if they think those positions should be filled, they can create that agency again. But they won't be there when I get there.
We got a break right here. You guys can hang around. We'll talk more about your vision, your platform for President of the United States. That would be Lars Mapstead, and Mapstead, pardon me. We also got Spike Cohen, who was a candidate for vice president as a Libertarian in 2020. Stay with us. We're in the Element Well studio. We're visiting with Lars Mapstead, a candidate for President 2024 as a Libertarian. Spike Cohen, the founder and president of You Are the Power, and a 2020 vice presidential candidate as a Libertarian. So, Lars, you guys told me before you came to the studio, you heard a little bit about my rant on the deficit, our interest tab, the nuttiness going on there. It's so for the benefit of the audience, our spending in this current fiscal year is 50% more than it was in 2019, pre-pandemic. It's some $2 trillion higher than then. Have we got a chance of getting out of this cycle?
Yeah, we do, but it's going to take I think the best way to grow out of this cycle is literally grow GDP so that we can get the money coming in that needs to pay off this debt. But we need to get this down because it's a tsunami that's coming for America, this debt wave, right? And it just keeps growing and growing. There's been no president in my lifetime that has left office with less debt than they started with. And that's something that, it doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican, the machine of spending money on bigger and bigger government has got to stop, because the end game is a Great Depression like nothing we've ever seen before.
Yeah. And, I have derided Republicans in that respect as well, because they talk this game of, we got to get this spending under control, and then they sign off on legislation that increases spending, and then when that money flows down to the state and the municipal, county level, et cetera, they praise it. They take victory laps about it. So, when do we ever say no is the question I pose. When do we say no? We just can't afford that. When's the last time you heard that statement out of Washington? Sorry, we can't afford that.
Yeah, and also that, and when's the last time you ever heard layoffs in Washington, right? I ran a big tech company, and it was often that we would take the bottom 10% of the employees and move them out and get new employees coming in. But Washington never lays anybody out. It just grows and grows and grows.
And I believe the surrounding areas, the suburbs of Washington, Virginia, and so forth, the most expensive housing in the country, right?
Yep.
And that's because that's where all the people that have the money are. Yeah. Out of Washington. There's a connection.
Go
there.
figure.
Yeah, and this is not a Democrat or Republican problem.
Sure.
This is a government problem.
Exactly.
This is a duopoly problem. I remember Donald Trump saying that he was going to, at one point he said he was going to eliminate the entire debt, but then he said, I'm definitely going to reduce the debt. Donald Trump ran up more debt in one term than Barack Obama did in 2 terms.
That's right.
And Barack Obama had the previous record. Every president, and this isn't beating up on Trump, every president since Reagan has run up more debt per year, because some of them have only served one term, more debt per year than the president before them. And Joe Biden is now looking to try to break that record.
Yeah, sure is. And it's interesting you bring that point up. We actually talk about that a lot on the program when we talk about presidential politics. And it's true, in the campaign and leading up to 2016, Donald Trump said, actually what he said is, in the first term, I believe I could eliminate the deficit, essentially balance the budget. Yeah. And he said, you give me 2 terms, I'll completely eliminate and pay the debt off. Yeah. And I'm thinking, no, you're not. Yeah. It's not going to happen. So, But what do you do? We've discussed this on the program at length, Spike, Lars. We got 70% of the spending pies on autopilot, coming from Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the variety of other assistance programs, and then debt. So we're only really, if you think about the last debt ceiling negotiations, what they basically agreed to, we're only going to touch this 15% because Republicans said not touching defense, and Democrats say don't want to touch non-defense discretionary spending. And by the way, the 70% of our spending that comprises all those other permanent program, seemingly. Those are off limits to both parties. Yeah. Well, okay, well, you're not serious about doing anything here.
Yeah, the Democrats said, we're going to raise the debt in the next 10 years to $52 trillion. And the Republicans said, that's insane. It should be $47 trillion. Exactly. It's insanity. Now, as you mentioned, a lot of this is autopilot, and there's actually a plan that deals with Social Security by moving it out of the government and turning it into a private contract-based individual retirement plan. It's called Plan for America, and I am an unpaid spokesman who is going around singing the praises of this thing. It has been scored. It will work. Planforamerica.us, and what it does is it understands that you can't simply cut off the what so many elderly and so many people rely on for meeting their financial needs and for their health care needs.
Right.
But what you can do is get it out of the hands of the government and turn it into an actual program that is being voluntarily and privately funded, and which eventually turns into something that people can opt out of, and which what they don't use can actually be bequeathed to their heirs and assigns. And it not only eliminates eventually the deficit that's caused by that, but it completely takes off the table most of the $200 trillion in unfunded mandates that we have right now.
Wow. Well, reform is needed, but the problem, Lars, as you know, is any time you even discuss reform, you get your head chopped out.
Yep.
I mean, it gets construed by political foes as they want to kill your Social Security and Medicare. No, we want to do something so it's round.
Yeah,
is the reality.
Yeah, I say that it's going to end up like Detroit. It's basically going to end up in bankruptcy, and everybody's going to be left holding the bag, right? So the answer to this is to grow the economy so much that those things that we owe are a small piece of the pie that is going on. And so we need to unleash America's energy. We need to become energy independent and really unleash the power of our economy.
So what else are you telling the folks, Lars, that you'd want to do if you're elected president? You've made a lot of points already. What else is on your mind?
So I've been audited by the IRS a bunch of times, and I don't feel like that should be a thing that anybody has to go through. I think that the tax system, everybody's dissatisfied with the tax system. Whether you're right or left, you feel in some way that it's a bad thing. There's too many loopholes. So I want to abolish all the loopholes forever by ending the tax code, abolishing the IRS, repealing the 16th Amendment, and replacing that with a consumption tax that's easy for everybody to understand, and that everybody knows everybody is paying.
Okay, so would this be a consumption tax that would be modeled after the fair tax?
Yeah, I'm a fair tax supporter. I signed the fair tax pledge. Yeah.
So why do you think that got no traction? Because that was one of the deals that some members of the House made to Kevin McCarthy. We want to get the fair tax out of committee on the floor, but it failed.
Yeah, so there was a big attack from the left, basically saying that it was regressive and that it would harm the lower income people. Right. But that's just not the case, because what I've kind of looked at is that if you make less than $40,000 a year, you essentially don't pay any tax,
right?
Because there's a rebate and there's all kinds of stuff in there. So, but politicians are really good at scaring you and selling you something even that's good for you. They'll talk you out of it. So it's on me to try to convince people that that's the correct path forward.
Okay. Well, certainly the IRS is going in a different direction with additional funding and the plan to hire a bunch more IRS agents. So how many times you say you've been audited?
It's probably 3 or 4.
Okay. I've had 2. They're no fun. As you know, they consume a lot of time, and usually it ends up one I had, they ended up owing me money before it was over with, which is how silly the trigger was that caused them to contact me about an audit.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a lot of time and money invested in that yields very little. And I think this idea that Biden and the Democrats have that, by bolstering the IRS, they're going to go after all these dirty, greedy, rich people that are hiding their income. And it's actually quite the opposite. Those are the people that actually do file their tax returns correctly and pay what is owed.
Yeah.
Where all the money that's missing is not from them.
And they already have teams of agents working on them as individuals because they're such high worth individuals. That none of these 87,000 agents are going to
They're not
billionaires. They're going to enforce the people that have been not paying taxes on their Uber.
Yeah.
Or the money they
Venmo.
make on Etsy or on Venmo or whatever. They're going after the gig economy. They're going after a lot of people who have been saying tax the rich, and they're about to find out that to the IRS, everyone's rich.
I saw the last Treasury report, did a little digging there, said the top 1% in terms of dollars, absolute dollars of taxes paid more than the bottom 95%. But that's deemed unfair. I agree it is unfair that the top 1% are shouldering such a huge part of the load. Appreciate you gentlemen coming in. Good luck to you, Lars.
Thank you very much.
Yep. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth.